Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The Union Cabinet has decided to temporarily suspend the MPLADS scheme and to cut the salaries of MPs by 30% in order to raise financial resources to fund the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. For this purpose, the Cabinet has introduced an ordinance to amend the Salaries, Allowances and Pensions Act of 1954, and through this legislative move, the government has provided for a 30% salary cut for all the MPs, including the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. These savings will be channeled into the Consolidated Fund of India in order to fund the fight against COVID-19. Then the President of India, the Vice President, and all the governors have announced a voluntary 30% cut to their salaries. In this context, it is very important to understand why the President has announced a voluntary cut to his salary and why his salary and allowances cannot be diminished by the government or the Parliament. See, Article 59 of the Constitution provides for the salary and allowances of the President. These provisions are contained under the second schedule of the Indian Constitution, and it can be determined by a law passed by the Parliament. But the same article says that the salary and allowances of the President cannot be diminished by the government or the Parliament during the middle of his term. This provision has been provided in order to ensure the independence of the President's office from the government and the Parliament. So that's the reason why the President had to announce a voluntary cut, whereas the salaries of the MPs has been diminished by amending the Salaries, Allowances and Pensions Act of 1984 through an ordinance. Then it is also important to note that the Vice President does not draw any salary for his role as the Vice President of India, but instead he draws a salary for being the ex officio chairperson of the Rajya Sabha. And also note that there are a few instances where the Vice President gets to act as the President of India. During such instances, the Vice President will draw the same salary as that of the President, and it cannot be diminished by the government or the Parliament during the period in which the Vice President is acting as the President of India. So the money raised through these salary cuts and voluntary contributions would be diverted into the Consolidated Fund of India in order to raise financial resources for funding the government's fight against COVID-19. Then upon this, the Union Cabinet has also approved a temporary suspension of the MPLADS scheme. See, under this scheme, each MP of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha is provided with 5 crore rupees every year in order to carry out developmental works in his or her constituency. But this scheme is being suspended for a period of 2 years, and this will translate to savings of around 7,900 crore rupees, which would also be deposited in the Consolidated Fund of India. However, MPs belonging to opposition parties have welcomed the decision of the government to cut their salaries for funding the fight against COVID-19, but they have criticized the government's decision to suspend the MPLADS scheme. Because according to MPs from the opposition parties, the MPLADS scheme was very crucial to fund developmental works at the grassroots and to sponsor emergency relief during disasters such as COVID-19. So in this context, let us have a more detailed discussion on the MPLADS scheme, including its background, features, and as well as a critical analysis on the performance of this scheme. See, MPLADS stands for Members of Parliament Local Area Development Scheme. As the name itself indicates, its main objective is to promote local development in the respective constituencies of the MPs. This MP Local Area Development Scheme is a central sector scheme, which means that the scheme is entirely funded by the central government. This scheme was launched by the P.V. Narasimha Rao government in 1993, and it empowers the MPs to recommend development works in their respective constituencies. But the only condition is that the MP should focus on creating durable community assets based on local needs. See, this scheme was initially being administered by the Ministry of Rural Development. But from 1994, the scheme was transferred to the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So it is this ministry which is responsible for administering the MPLADS scheme, and hence it is responsible for allocating and transferring the funds, and it is also responsible for reviewing the implementation and completion of the projects that are funded under the MPLADS scheme. When the scheme was launched, the allocation for each MP was just a few lakh rupees per year. But slowly the allocation was increased to 1 crore, 2 crore, etc. And today the allocation under MPLADS stands at 5 crore rupees per annum for each MP. Under this scheme, the MP has to recommend local development projects to the district collector, that is the district administration, which has to be taken up in their respective constituencies. The other day, while looking at a practice question, we had discussed that all the members of the Rajya Sabha and as well as all the members of the Lok Sabha, including the nominated members, are eligible to receive the allocation of funds under the MPLADS scheme. See, in the case of Lok Sabha MPs, their constituencies are well defined, so they are mandated to spend this amount on local development projects within their constituency. But in the case of Rajya Sabha members, their constituency is not as well defined because they contest elections from a state. So the Rajya Sabha members have to select one or more districts from the state that they have been elected, and they have to use this money to fund development projects within these selected districts. But in the case of nominated members of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, they do not have a constituency at all. So in this case, the nominated members have to select any one state in the country, and within this state, they can select one or more districts where they would like to fund the development projects under the MPLADS scheme. Now let us look at some more features of the scheme. See, under MPLADS, the MP has to first understand the local needs of his constituency. For this purpose, he can work with various trusts, societies, NGOs, and more importantly, he needs to interact with the citizens and promote a participatory approach in order to first identify the local needs of the population. Once the local needs are identified, then the MP has to work with the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, the state government, and more importantly the district administration in order to make use of these funds. Usually, the development projects that are sponsored under MPLADS includes the construction of local roads, the provision of drinking water, providing better facilities in local schools and local hospitals, and as well as for providing emergency relief during times of disasters. So once the local needs of the constituency has been identified, the MP will have to write a letter on his official letterhead to the district administration, asking them to take up the project that has been identified by making use of funds under the MPLADS scheme. So subsequently, the district administration under the district collector will select an implementing agency and execute the project. And the funding for this project will come directly from the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation through the MPLADS scheme. So as the project is being executed, the district administration will be responsible to report back to the central ministry on the implementation and completion of the project. And also, the utilization of the funds under this scheme will be reviewed by the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. So basically, the funds under MPLADS are not directly available with the MP. The MP is only recommending a project based on the local needs to the district administration, and the funding for executing this project will come directly from the central ministry. So basically, the central ministry is not directly dispersing these funds to the MPs. Instead, it is dispersing these funds to the district administration. So the 5 crore rupees that is available per MP per constituency is released to the district administration in 2 installments of 2.5 crore rupees each. And this fund is non-lapsable in nature. That is, the funds which remain unutilized in a particular year, they get carried forward to the next year. Under the scheme, MPs have been mandated to ensure that every year at least 15% of the funds are spent on areas inhabited by SC population, and at least 7.5% of the funds should be spent on areas inhabited by ST population. Then, in order to promote the participation of NGOs, trusts and societies, especially for the betterment of tribal people, up to 75 lakh rupees can be provided to these organizations under the MPLADS scheme. Then, as we discussed, the MPs have to recommend only such projects which can create durable assets based on the local needs of the constituency. The MPs also have the option of converging these MPLAD funds with other government schemes such as Manrega, Kelo India, etc. Then the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation has recently launched the One MP One Idea initiative in order to promote greater participation of the local people in the scheme. It is basically a competition which adopts a bottoms-up approach and encourages the local people to identify the local problems and come up with local solutions that are innovative, which can be implemented in a sustainable manner and which can be scaled up. So under this competition, the local innovators in each constituency are recognized and given out cash awards and as well as a certificate of appreciation. But over the years, legal experts and economists have raised a number of issues with the MPLAD scheme. But despite this, its suspension by the Government of India has been opposed by MPs of the opposition parties. See, the very foundation of the MPLAD scheme is based on citizen participation, that is on a grassroots bottoms-up approach. It is trying to promote decentralized development through a participatory approach. But development economists have pointed out that there is a lack of citizen participation under the MPLAD scheme, and there is no tracker or indicator available to indicate the extent of citizen participation. The CAG, which is responsible for auditing and reviewing the utilization of funds, has repeatedly noted that local needs have been ignored under the MPLAD scheme. The CAG has also noted that MPLADS has become a tool for MPs to gain political mileage in the run-up to elections. This is primarily because of its non-lapsable nature. See, the funds that are unutilized in a particular year, it just rolls over to the next year. This non-lapsable nature of the fund incentivizes the MP to sit idle for the first 4 years after being elected, and they end up spending the entire amount in a haphazard manner in the last year, that is in the election year, in order to impress their electorate. So this results in wasteful expenditure, and it also fails to create durable assets. So that's the reason why critics argue that MPLADS has just become a tool for MPs to gain political mileage during the election year. Then the scheme also suffers from corruption and inefficiency due to insufficient reporting and monitoring by the district administration and the central government respectively. It has been noted in several instances that due to lack of reporting and monitoring, several non-durable projects have been funded under MPLADS. Then the CAG has also noted that in several cases, trusts and NGOs related to the MPs and their family members have been funded, giving rise to corruption and favoritism. Then apart from this, various commissions have observed that MPLADS is unconstitutional because it violates the principle of federalism and the doctrine of separation of powers. This observation was first made by the National Commission to review the working of the Constitution, which was headed by Justice Venkatachalaya when it submitted its report in 2002. The same observation has been made later by the Planning Commission and as well as by the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, headed by Veerappa Moily in its report on ethics in governance. According to these commissions, MPLADS violates the principle of federalism because its pattern of funding bypasses the state government and weakens the federal structure of the Constitution, which is a basic feature of the Constitution. Then these commissions have also felt that MPLADS violates the doctrine of separation of powers because the scheme ends up providing executive responsibilities to the legislature. See, the doctrine of separation of powers, which is again a basic feature of the Constitution, provides for a clear separation between the legislature, the executive and the judiciary. These commissions have argued that by asking MPs to get involved in executive projects, the MPLAD scheme has blurred the division between the legislature and the executive. Later, these constitutional and legal challenges came up in front of the Supreme Court, and in 2010, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court upheld the MPLAD scheme to be constitutional. The constitution bench observed that the MPLAD scheme does not violate the doctrine of separation of powers because it only allows the legislator to recommend the project and not take up the execution or implementation of the project. The Supreme Court noted that the funds are dispersed and allotted by the central government, and the execution, that is the implementation of the project, is still carried out by the district executive. So since the role of the legislator is only to recommend a project, the Supreme Court felt that this does not violate the doctrine of separation of powers between the legislature and the executive. Over the years, various MPs and MLAs have supported the scheme as it allows the elected representatives to serve their respective constituencies by carrying out micro-intervention and by promoting citizen participation based on the local needs of the constituency. Take for example the recent case involving Shashi Tharoor, who represents the Thiruvananthapuram constituency. Recently, Shashi Tharoor successfully made use of the MPLAD funds to arrange for hundreds of RT-PCR test kits in order to promote widespread testing for COVID-19 in his respective constituency. Such examples illustrate how MPLAD funds can be successfully used by the elected representatives to serve the local needs through micro-interventions and targeted development projects which can help create durable assets for the constituency. So in short, the MPLAD scheme has had its share of success and failures, but for the time being, the central government has decided to suspend the scheme for a period of 2 years in order to raise funds for the government's fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. See, right now, MPs were taking up individual initiatives under MPLADS, and these piecemeal efforts were not seen to be sufficient against COVID-19. So the government has decided to suspend the scheme for a couple of years and use the financial resources to fund a comprehensive and integrated strategy against the pandemic. Now let's take up the next article. In a disturbing development from New York, a tiger at the Bronx Zoo has tested positive for COVID-19. Along with this infected tiger, a number of other tigers and lions at the zoo have also started showing symptoms of COVID-19, such as dry cough, breathlessness, etc. So it has been suspected that an asymptomatic caretaker might have passed on the infection to these bigger felines. Now this is a very disturbing development because if the novel coronavirus has the potential to infect bigger cats, then it poses a grave threat to a number of threatened species such as the tiger and the Asiatic lion, both of which have been listed as endangered by the IUCN. As soon as these reports emerged, the conservation authorities in India have started taking immediate measures in order to protect the threatened species. The National Tiger Conservation Authority, which is responsible for managing the tiger reserves, and the Central Zoo Authority, which is responsible for administering the zoological parks, have immediately notified all the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries and zoological parks to implement strict biosafety measures in order to track the emergence of any COVID-19 symptoms amongst the caretakers and forest officials. These biosafety measures are being taken in order to ensure that the novel coronavirus doesn't get transmitted from humans to threatened species such as tigers, lions, etc. Now let's take up the next article. The Union Health Ministry has come out with a revised strategy for combating the COVID-19 pandemic. The Health Ministry has said that India has just stepped out of the second stage of transmission, that is local transmission, and it has entered what it calls large outbreaks that can be contained phase. Basically, the Health Ministry has stopped short of stating that India has entered the third stage of transmission, that is community transmission, and instead it has stated that India has entered a phase where large outbreaks are being reported in a few hotspots, but these outbreaks can be contained with an effective strategy. As a part of this revised strategy, the Health Ministry has called for redefining the area of operation as far as disease surveillance is concerned. It is trying to give exclusive focus to hotspots where major outbreaks have been reported, and it is trying to step up surveillance of asymptomatic cases and their contacts by working with the state governments and the local administration. Along with enhanced surveillance, it is trying to expand the testing capacity in order to test all the suspected cases in these hotspots. The revised strategy calls for increasing the isolation and quarantine capacity by adding dedicated hospitals and dedicated blocks in order to treat COVID-19 patients. As a part of this revised strategy, the Health Ministry is looking to enforce social distancing measures with strict perimeter control. This is being done in order to ensure that those who have been quarantined do not jump or skip quarantine. Then the Health Ministry is also advocating prophylaxis treatment or preventive treatment for healthcare workers, primary household contacts who are at the highest risk of infection through drugs such as hydroxychloroquine. Under the revised strategy, it is also planning to spread greater awareness through audio, visual and social media platforms. Then upon this, the government has also come out with a 3-tiered protocol for treating confirmed and suspected cases. The focus area of this 3-tier protocol is to meet the hospitalization needs and the need for intensive care and ventilator support, provided if there is an exponential surge in the number of cases. So with these revised steps, the government has shifted its strategy to large outbreak containment, which falls between local transmission and community transmission. Now let's take up the practice questions. Which of the following can be considered as features of a smart city as per the smart city's mission? Does it include housing and inclusiveness, expanding housing opportunities for all, creating walkable localities, reducing congestion, air pollution and resource depletion, preserving and developing open spaces such as parks, playgrounds and recreational spaces in order to enhance the quality of life of the citizens, reduce the urban heat effects, promoting a variety of transport options, applying smart solutions to infrastructure and services. Amongst the given options, all the 6 features can be considered to be a part of a smart city. So option D is the right answer. See, the objective of the smart city's mission is to rejuvenate and retrofit the urban areas in order to make them citizen friendly and sustainable through the use of technology. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, smart city command centers, which provide for CCTV surveillance and traffic management, have been turned into war rooms in order to fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. See, the smart city command centers provide for CCTV surveillance of public spaces, they provide for real-time traffic management, and these command centers are being used by the local administration to create heat maps in order to set up virus containment zones. It is being used to track the movement of health workers and ambulances in real time by using GPS technology and GIS mapping. These command centers are also providing for better monitoring of COVID-19 positive cases, for monitoring the disinfection initiatives, and for setting up video conferencing and telemedicine facilities as well. Now let's take up the second practice question. Which organization can ban or regulate the export and import of goods? Is it the Ministry of External Affairs or the Department of Economic Affairs, the Directorate General of Foreign Trade or the Ministry of Shipping? The correct answer is option C. It is the Directorate General of Foreign Trade which can ban or regulate the export and import of goods. This question has been asked because this article on page number 10 refers to the ban on the export of essential drugs such as hydroxychloroquine, paracetamol, etc. that has been placed by the Directorate General of Foreign Trade in order to ensure that adequate supplies of these essential drugs are available to meet the domestic demand, which could offer a possible treatment against the COVID-19 pandemic. A number of countries around the world are hoping that hydroxychloroquine, which is primarily an anti-malarial drug, can be used to treat COVID-19. And India, being one of the largest producers of hydroxychloroquine, decided to place a ban on the export of this drug in order to ensure that there are adequate supplies to meet domestic demand. But just the other day, the United States has requested India to lift this ban on the export of hydroxychloroquine, and President Trump has had a personal conversation with the Prime Minister, and he has requested India to assist the United States, which has been severely affected by the pandemic. The President has even publicly threatened to retaliate against India if the Indian government doesn't lift the ban on the export of hydroxychloroquine. Similar requests are being made by Brazil and other countries as well, which are looking at hydroxychloroquine as a possible solution. And this presents to India both an opportunity and as well as a challenge. The opportunity is that since India is a leading producer of hydroxychloroquine, it could help promote Indian exports. and promote the growth of the pharmaceutical sector and place India as a leading country which is helping the rest of the world in its fight against COVID-19. According to latest reports, India has already lifted the ban and it has approved the export of hydroxychloroquine to friendly South Asian neighbors and as well as to the United States. But the challenge for India is that first it needs to ensure that its domestic demand is being met and it should not be forced to export the drug under international pressure at the cost of its domestic interests. So the challenge for India is to strike a balance between the need to maintain friendly relations with friendly countries and the need to protect its national interests. Now let's take up the next practice question. Which of the following statements are correct? The Russian Imperial Movement, which is abbreviated as RID, is a Russian movement opposed to imperialism and colonialism. Recently, the United States has designated the group as a terrorist organization. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. The Russian Imperial Movement is basically a far right-wing, ultra-nationalist paramilitary organization that is based out of Russia. It has been known to promote radical white supremacist and neo-Nazi ideologies, and it has been encouraging the spread of these radical ideologies across Western Europe, especially in Scandinavian countries such as Sweden. Even though the Russian Imperial Movement is not directly supported by the Russian government, the United States believes that Russian President Vladimir Putin has indirectly encouraged the RID to interfere in the Ukrainian civil war by sponsoring the pro-Russian rebels. So as a result, the United States has decided to designate the Russian Imperial Movement as a terrorist organization. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2016 prelims paper. With reference to the economic history of medieval India, the term Araghatta refers to a water wheel used in the irrigation of land. Option C is the right answer. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, critically evaluate the utility and effectiveness of MPLADS scheme. The second question, the potential of COVID-19 to affect bigger felines poses a grave threat to biodiversity. Discuss. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post them in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.